morning and welcome to The Point. It is Wednesday, April 14th, 2021. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, GBN TV channel 7, 11 and 20. Good morning to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9, and of course the folks joining us on Party Grenada and Go to Fet Facebook pages. Our virtual guest this morning is Minister of Education, Honorable Emmalin Pierre. Good morning, Minister Pierre. How are you?
Good morning to you, Blossom. I'm doing very well, and good morning to all of your listeners and your viewers. I hope they're doing well too.
I hope so as well. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. For those of you on our visual platforms, we're having a little bit of issues with Minister Pierre's camera, but as long as we can hear the message, I think that would be sufficient for us in the meantime if we can get the situation under control. But as long as we can hear, that would be best for all of us. So, Minister Pierre, coming out of yesterday, or I should say this week, you hosted post-cabinet briefing yesterday. And one of the biggest takeaways for members of the public, specifically students and parents, is the relation to the reopening of schools and getting the clearance that everyone can return to the classroom. So just reiterate for us that information, and then we're going to get into the specifics.
Okay. So as you know, Blossom, sometime last year, when we reopened school, we reopened on the 6 feet physical distancing, meaning that all persons in the school vicinity or within the school compound must be observing the protocol of 6 feet physical distancing. That also meant that when you go to the classroom, the way that students were sitting, they also had to be observing that. And later on, we got the green light from Ministry of Health, because the Ministry of Education don't make those decisions. We are guided by the Cabinet and the Ministry of Health. So we were directed that we can reduce that from 6 to 3 feet based on the current situation as it relates to risk. That was done, and we fortunately were able last term to accommodate many students. Some schools were able to accommodate all their students every day. And it's something people don't understand. Some schools did have all students every day, but those are the schools with smaller population. And the classroom size was able to accommodate everyone sitting 3 feet apart. But there were schools where, because of the classroom size and the number of students in the classroom, it was impossible to get the 3 feet. And so these were the students who were not going every day. So some people were doing 2 days and 3 days. Now, Ministry of Health and Cabinet would have directed us that for the opening of this school term, that we can revert to the pre-6 feet, which is that you are accommodating everyone. So we are going lower than 3 to say that if 2 or 1 is possible, whatever you can do to accommodate every student, we are going to do. We are going to do that this term. And we are trusting God, Blossom, that nothing changes significantly. Because if anything does, it means we either would have to go back to 3 to 6 or to shut down. So right now we are accommodating everyone back. Now, very important to note is that you notice we did not make a public announcement saying everyone return on Monday. What we said was that the principals of the respective schools will give direction to the students and parents directly, meaning that there are some schools that would have been ready Monday morning and they would have been able to accept everyone. And we had 73 or 74 schools like that. And there are others who would have needed a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week maybe, to put systems in place, structures in place, have their engagement with their teachers and their parents and so on before they can accommodate everybody back. And we gave that leeway, which is why we allowed principals to make sure that they were satisfied that they were ready for Monday. Because remember, they were home for 3 weeks. So you may not have had time in the 3 weeks vacation to go in and move your furniture out of storage or you may not have had time to go and reorganize the school to accommodate everyone. So hence the reason.
What does that mean for us in terms of getting our students caught up on what they may have missed? Because with the way school was, it made it somewhat difficult for everybody to be up to par with learning A, B, C, D, E as set by the curriculum. What now takes place in ensuring that our students catch up to what the curriculum, where they should be at this point in the school year?
Right. And I love the way that you put it, and I wish everyone could see it in that way, because we get carried away with A's and A plus, and I always like to say, don't focus too much on the position. Don't focus too much on the A. Focus on what the child should be doing at this particular stage. Very critical. So I'll use an example to say that I have a relative who sent me her daughter's report card, and that daughter had all A's. And of course, I recognized the daughter, right? And I actually gave her a little encouragement. But I had a quiet word with mommy to say, don't get complacent, because those A's might be for her achievement below her level, right? So it's very important that we be mindful of that. We've missed a lot. The hope blossom, and this is my encouragement, the hope is that all is not lost. I empathize with some of my colleagues where their schools have been closed since March last year, right? So there are some places where they're not having the conversation we're having. They've been closed since March last year and they don't know when they will be opening. Now, how are we going to catch up? The truth is, this is going to be a major challenge. That is why every minute in the classroom counts. Every minute in the classroom counts. Every opportunity to engage students and provide support, it counts. I'll give you one example of a comment that was made by a fellow Minister of Education in one of our neighboring countries. She said, I'm very concerned. When I look at the number of students who have gone off conducting on buses, gone off cashing and packing in certain grocery stores, the number of persons who have dropped out. So when you speak about catch-up, we have an additional conversation to have. How many persons are dropping out of the system? How many persons' lives will forever be impacted by this situation? That is why our role at this stage, our responsibility is to save every person. We don't want to leave anybody behind. And it's a responsibility for Ministry of Education, teachers, principals, parents, the community. Do you know a young boy or a young girl who did not return yesterday? And is there anything you can do? Is there any way you can help? Now, remember last term, we did this national assessment where teachers were supposed to engage their students in a baseline, in some cases, assessment to determine where they are. Now, we've received most of the results from that. We're assessing that, finalizing the assessment of that, and to take some actions based on that. So it means that in certain schools, we may have to say to parents that your child is so way below, because that child might have been below even before COVID, right? So you might end up with below. Now that child might be so below that we need to engage this child with some additional support after school, maybe on a Saturday, who knows? But we would come up with a specific program to match the data that we've collected and to try to provide as much support as possible. Mindful that while we speak about extra, we do not want to put any child under pressure. We do not want to put any child under more psychological trauma because our students are indeed severely affected. So we're going to find creative ways so that when you come, for example, I'm just giving an example, you probably might not just be doing math, but you might be doing a little craft, to engage you socially and otherwise, engage your mind in a more creative way. So it would not be come on, we have 10 maths questions to do and we have to catch up on this. We would find a creative way to help as many of our students as we possibly can. But this is not just a role for the Ministry of Education. I'm appealing Blossom, a church community, our NGOs, our organizations in communities, some parents coming together and deciding on a little program. And mind you, I want to say this, if a group of parents come together, there's sufficient material, regardless of their level, that they will be able to help students. So I'll give an example of my observation last night of my son on MSTAR doing practice questions. Didn't need a teacher to correct it last night. Of course, this morning he can take it, but guess what? The questions are self-corrected. So instantly there, the parents would be able to get the answers, even if they don't know the answers, but because it's self-corrected, they would know where the child needs additional help. So Blossom, we have a lot of work to do. That's the bottom line. Let's put it as that.
Let's look back at how school was run last year under the 6 foot social distancing, the 3 feet social distancing, and the ability of the children to cooperate as best as they can, considering their children, with the rules and regulations. What were some of the hiccups, if any, from the students' perspective in adhering to the protocols in our schools? And do you foresee those issues, for lack of a better word, reoccurring this time around?
Well, I'll put it simple like this, Blossom, and I don't normally overestimate children in the way that we sometimes do, right? Meaning, as adults, we behave a particular way. We do things at home. We do things in the community. We show children a way to behave, and then we come and we expect them to do the opposite, right? So sometimes when I look at the behavior of children, you see how they model what we do, right? And I would not be surprised if it's a challenge for a student to wear a mask, not because of the discomfort, but because of what they hear us say as adults, what they see us do as adults, right? So that makes it even more difficult because, Blossom, when you walk around town, minus all the students, you see how many adults, how many parents are not wearing a mask. So it is a double challenge to help our students to understand the importance. And I know that our principals and our management teams at school, that is a challenge for them, right? And so all we can do is to continue to encourage. There's a mentality that we don't have cases here, we don't have a cluster here. And so, we can relax. We don't have to follow any protocol at all. Now, let me say this. There is one reason that the decision was taken to reduce from 3 feet lower for the students to be accommodated. And that is the level of risk that is involved in keeping them at home and the level of risk that is involved in not engaging them fully. So the decision was taken not because there's no COVID, COVID is gone. That's not the reason. The reason is when you weigh the risk of COVID, you weigh that against the current situation, and then you weigh that against the risk of them not being fully engaged. It is not just locally established, it's internationally established as well, that the risk is higher of not fully engaging them. You've heard the UN Secretary General refer to the generational catastrophe. And, it may sound like some nice, colorful words, but in other words, what he's saying, it might well be impossible in many cases to catch up. So we started on the conversation of catch up, and he is saying, if we continue how we're going, bet your life, we may never be able to catch up because the next generation will meet, right? And so the problems that you're going to have is not just the academic catch up, but the social, where that child was in school learning certain behaviors, to model certain behaviors. They're standing in the line to go to the tuck shop. Guess what? When they go to the bank, they won't be cussing and carrying on because they've learned in school order and standing in the line. The discipline, the moral values, coming together to pray. Some of them don't pray at home. It's their only chance to come together to pray. There's so many opportunities that you get in a school setting that many of our students may never, ever in their lifetime learn at their home, right? And believe me, they're not looking at no show where they're going to learn it. So let's not say on the internet or TV because they're playing games, right? So we're in a serious situation. And I wish that every person would see what is happening and understand what is happening. It is real And so we ought not to be treating the situation lightly. It is a situation that calls for combined efforts. It calls for everyone making a sacrifice in all forms. Maybe the sacrifice that a parent has to make is to leave work and go straight home and give some support. And I'm speaking to myself as well. The sacrifice that a parent may have to make is to give up a show that they like to spend a little more time with their son or with their daughter. The sacrifice that the church may have to make is to say, look, we are going to invest in an after-school program for the children of the church or the children of the community. It calls for everyone. The sacrifice that the teacher may have to make is to say, look, we're going to match after 4 o'clock or after 3 o'clock, right? Because we can't afford to miss this opportunity. So I'm not saying don't match, but you can't be matching 11 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning. A child is missing an opportunity that, if not taken, may not avert the generational catastrophe that the UN Secretary General is talking about.
Well, you preempted me, Minister, because that's where I was going next in relation to the protest our public officers and teachers have been engaged in for the past 2 months or so. Over the past few weeks, they've taken their protests to the streets and holding marches across St. George and other parts of the island, including the sister Isle of Carriacou. How close are we, if we're closer, to solving the issue, bringing an end to this impasse in relation to the payment of that 4% to our teachers and public officers?
So I'm not sure I would be able to give you the specific answer that you're looking for in terms of a date and time. What I can say, the Ministry of Education is not involved in this process. We're not involved. So I'm not speaking now in my capacity as Minister for Education, because this matter has nothing to do directly with the Ministry of Education. But I can speak now as a member of the government, right? And when I say not as Minister for Education, I'm just saying that the Ministry of Education directly is not involved. So I'm speaking in a broader sense now in my capacity as Minister of Government or government member of the cabinet. Now, as you're aware, there's a government negotiating team. And from all indications, that team, reporting back to cabinet, has reached out and has engaged the leadership of the union. And as you would have heard before, the first engagement was based on the situation. Let us look at a situation where we can defer this thing, right? Defer this payment. Now, the union requested or demanded that a date should be tied to any deferral, that we don't want to defer indefinitely. And so the date that was given, or the timeline that was given by the negotiating team, is that considering all factors, it's possible by the end of December, right? By the 31st of December. Now, what the union seems to be uncomfortable with is that December is too far away, right? Well, you know, before you wink, it's Christmas. But the union feels December is too far away. And I believe from indication of the government negotiating team, they were proposing by May. And government is saying by May is impossible, right? Not that we don't want to. As a matter of fact, the government has explained it's going to cost government more by delaying. So delaying is only because we need to delay. You just don't have it, and you don't want to do it for this month, and then you can't do it next month because it's recurring, right? So this has been the situation. So I would assume, Blossom, that the government negotiating team and all of those involved in the negotiating process will continue to reach out to the leadership and attempt to engage them in follow-up discussions and conversations. I believe there is an engagement due, engaging the team from the Ministry of Finance. And I suspect all of that would happen in short timing. And hopefully we would have some resolution which says that we understand that government is unable right now. We're going to work with the government to ensure that we continue to provide the service of education to our children in the best possible way. And we are holding government that once this situation continues to improve, that by the end of the year, we will be paid the 4%. And of course, there's the retroactive that comes with that. But Blossom, I think it's important whenever that is said to make the point that all other commitments that government has been making or has made, in the past, government has been keeping those, right? All commitments, right? And so for us, we have not been speaking, we have not been contemplating, it has never come up as a discussion, the issue of cutting salary or delayed payments, right? So in one or two countries that I know of, that's a conversation that is very hot, right? Because these countries are not talking about increase in payment. They are concerned about being able to even pay the salaries, right? And for us, we are managing the salaries. We are managing all the fringe benefits and all the other things, right? But all we are saying, the only thing that it's a bit difficult to commit right now is the increases, noting that we did it last year. We did it last year. If we did it last year, one cannot be so harsh to assume that we just don't want to do it this year. Why wouldn't we want to?
Has government, by extension the ministry, looked at alternatives or substitutions that can be put in place if, and dare I say, when another protest action takes place? Because now that the school year has started, they may take to the streets 10, 11 in the morning. They may wait until school is opened. You never know. But just in the event that it's a school or a protest, any thoughts on what can be done to at least keep our students engaged in the classroom?
Right. So, Blossom, I sense you have discovered my concern about this situation, not just from my recent comments, but comments before. And while I am not prepared to make a public statement to respond directly to your question, what I would say is that we just cannot continue like this. It's impossible for us to sit by and just allow this situation to continue. It's the most that I can say. And I'm saying this in the context of understanding the reality. Some little boy, some little girl who had a dream, some little boy, some little girl who had a goal in mind of what they wanted to be, it's just been lost through the crack as a result of COVID-19. So we shut down their home, and guess what? Getting them to come back was a challenge. Even a parent in that example couldn't get them to go back, right? Now, I've had reports of students with suicidal thoughts. I've had a report from a counselor of concern, of performance, students who are doing very well and just suddenly just can't seem to concentrate, right? And so it is a situation that warrants us to look beyond, to think deeper, to think broader. And so in that context, so the 4% is very important. I empathize. And if I was in the situation, I would want it too. I'll be very honest. I would want it too. But I would draw myself to the point where I start thinking that between now and December is not too long away. At least there's a commitment that we're looking at it for end of December. So that's the first thing I would think of. And two, I would think about the damage that is happening in the process between now and then. And then I would consider, and maybe when I get it, I probably might appreciate it even more then, because it may come in a larger sum than I would have gotten just a one-off in January or one-off in February. That is how I will look at it. So maybe just in time for that thing I wanted to buy for Christmas, that's how I would look at it. I'm not telling anybody to look at it that way, Blossom. I'm just saying that how I would look at it, that maybe it would be even more valued when I get it in a lump sum than the one-off monthly payments, right? Again, I'm not saying to anybody that they should look at it that way. I'm just saying if I was in the situation, I would want it, but I would consider those factors and I would make a decision to wait because of all of those factors, including what is happening in our education system.
All right, Minister, let's take a break and then we're going to come back to our questions and comments from our viewers and listeners. This is To The Point on GBN Classic. We will be right back.
Can you spend wisely and have more savings? Yes, you can. Learn more with Money Matters on GBN Television. The Money Matters series explores 12 top ways to save money. In this series, you will learn how to save by setting up your spending money right. Save on vehicle loans, home improvement projects, your credit cards, and even on prescription drugs. Tune in every Tuesday morning at 7:15 for Money Matters, a lighthearted conversation with financial planner Tali Francis. Follow the rebroadcast on Thursdays at 6:50 p.m. and on Sundays at 7:30 p.m. Money Matters is a financial literacy public awareness program sponsored by Republic Bank Grenada.
Republic Bank, we're the one for you.
Welcome on your blood heart so bad now. My gosh. I'm trying to sell me. I went down here to do something. And man try to deal me. Not the same man. Yeah, I wanted to deal me and tell you.
Property you come out in?
No, it's not that. I tell you, I had to go and do something. So, what? Somebody asked me to go and drop something for you. So I go. I see the man, and I know the man tried to sell me. He want to take me soul.
He damn good. Should I sell you?
Good. No, that man does deal? No, man. Watch. I know the man does deal, but what I say is, where when they? I expect the man try to do that day.
You want to go and see your light burning.
No. The man try to deal me. She want to take me soul. Folks, let me tell you something. This Friday we culture, I will tell all you who tried to sell me and what they tried to sell me for. So make sure and join us Friday on We Culture. All you careful. You are real dealers in the place.
They should have sell you. I don't know why you're here though. You should have been sold for real.
14.
A little more limbo, a little more shango. Kindly greasy pole, and we don't dance round the maple.
There's Welcome back to The Point. We're speaking with Minister of Education Emmalin Pierre, and it's at this point in the program where we will invite our listeners and viewers who may have comments, questions, queries, concerns. Now is your time to ask them. The landline number 435-2041. The WhatsApp number is also 435-2041. Please only written messages on WhatsApp, and you can continue to post your comments on the Facebook page and YouTube channel. Let's go to our first caller. Good morning, caller.
Good morning. Your Minister of Education fails to see a number of things. It is not only teachers who are affected. All public service on the government payroll is affected by that 4%. But there is another group of people, poor pensioners, sick pensioners like me, who depend on the 4% to pay me doctor and to buy me medication. We are affected too. Tell us to think of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Minister?
And Blossom, I totally empathize with the caller as a poor pensioner. I totally empathize with all other persons who are affected by this current situation. And just to say this, Blossom, government understands. Government empathizes too. The reality of the situation is that government wish it was in a position to do more. We're hearing what's happening in certain countries around the world. How many persons have lost their jobs? How many persons are no longer receiving anything at all from government because of the drop in revenue? You've just heard in St. Vincent, the Prime Minister emotionally announcing that public officers be prepared. It is very possible we would not be able to pay you salaries. Not talking about salary increases. So we understand, we empathize. And if it's one thing I'm certain of, that if the government had the resources, this was going to be done in January of this year. The challenge is the drop in revenue. When a country has a drop in revenue so drastic and so significant, what happens is that it affects almost everything that is recurrent. Because guess what? These revenues is what is paid for salaries and all of those recurrent electricity, water, all of those recurring costs that government has. So it is similar, and I like to describe government just like how we manage our own homes, that you get an income at the end of the month, and out of that income, you are able to now make certain payments. So I'm sure, Blossom, if you get a cut right now, and I trust, that you have not had, if you get a cut right now, you just have to know, without a choice, decide what is it that I can do this month and what is it that I cannot do this month. And unfortunately, some things that you would love to do this month, you just may not be able to do it because there is a cut and there's no other place in which you can generate a replacement of that cut. So of course, if I come and I say to you, I'm going to sponsor the difference, of course you can continue doing what you were doing before. But if no one comes forward to say, here is a replacement of the amount that you lost, or you find another means to get it, unfortunately, you're faced with the reality, the pain of not doing that thing that you really want to do. So you might decide you're going to cut off your electricity and you're going to go to a lamp because you just have to cut something, and that may be the only thing that you can cut. Painful for you because now you have to go by the neighbor to iron. But if it's cut and you don't have it, it becomes difficult for you to now walk into the Grenlec office to make that payment of the bill. And I'm just using that as an example to say to the caller, we empathize, we understand, we want to do this. And what I also believe is that if the situation improves so drastically before December, I believe the government is going to do it before December. But in a real situation where you don't have total control, unfortunately, you have to deal with those unfortunate situations. And I can give you the assurance that the Minister of Finance and his team on a weekly basis is reporting to the Cabinet all the steps that they are taking to ensure that we recover as quickly as possible. It is a weekly update that is provided.
All right, let's go to a Facebook question. Somebody on Facebook is asking, in Carriacou, there is an ongoing problem with Bishop's College and Hillsborough Government School where the children are being pushed around and given 2 days of school while Bishop's College give them 3 days, while the children have to be home and parents have to take time from work to be home with them. The question, why there wasn't a place prepared for Bishop's College students when the planning was done 2 years ago, instead of pushing the young children basically out of their own school every time a function is taking place and now hosting Bishop's College students, why?
Right, and I'm so very happy, Blossom, this question has come up so that it gives me an opportunity to explain. As a matter of fact, I would say to the caller, a couple of weeks ago, I questioned my Minister for Carriacou and Petit-Martinique Affairs, and I said to her, I thought it was Kakabawi for Kakabawi. And that you guys up there, had that kind of relationship that you know how to work things out very well. And she said to me, it's not that. It is just that the current situation, persons might be under pressure and they're trying their best to see what can be done to give support. So let me now give the historic background of this. As you know, Bishop's College, for many, many years, maybe from since the construction of the school, has not had major repairs done. As a matter of fact, we went further to not just talk about major repairs, but to add in a new wing so that we can expand the services that are provided to students, the opportunities that are provided to students. Now, when this project was conceptualized, the largest budget so far that we have spent on any school is dedicated towards Bishop's College, $10-something million, right? Our largest project thus far, for expansion or repair of a school. When the contractors, all of the plans were put in place to facilitate this project of 10 point something million, and it included moving the students into another building. And so the engineers came back to the Ministry of Education and to the funding agency to say, look, we understand that this is the plan, and this plan has been there more than 2 years ago, as the young lady said. But we're very concerned that we should not be spending money to repair this building. This building should be probably demolished and rebuilt, right? Very, very much concerned. And so the situation was assessed, further assessed, and a decision taken to spend more than the 10 point something million on that next building that I'm speaking about. So I'm not talking about the new wing that was going to be constructed for 10 plus million. When that decision was taken, and of course, everything we do is in thorough consultation with the staff, the principal, the church communities and Anglican school, and all of the stakeholders involved. And I believe persons looked at this situation from the perspective of, we would sacrifice for better, the cost of development. So we understand we may have to be relocated, we may have to be moved. We want a better school. We want a school for the next 30 years or so. Let us make that sacrifice. And that decision was taken. A number of options were looked at as it relates to moving the school to other temporary locations. And guess what? When you looked at the cost of preparing those temporary locations, the conclusion was, it does not make sense taking this cost from the budget that you're going to put into developing the school just to put up a temporary structure that you have to pull down in a couple months. And so what was decided by the stakeholders in the discussion at that level, let us look at a partnership between Hillsborough Primary School and Bishop's College, where they are going to share that school for the couple months. I think it's a term, 3 months, 4 months, what have you. Let us look at an arrangement where we give support to Hillsborough to do some repairs downstairs. They're going to do some work on a lab they have downstairs and all of those things to facilitate the sharing of that school for the short period. The principal and staff and others at that school agreed with the Ministry of Education that they thought it was a good idea. Let us do it this way. The consultation continued, the church agreed, and the key stakeholders agreed. And then the engagement of the parents of the Hillsborough Primary School was strongly opposed to sharing the school with the students of Bishop's College. Now, the way that I view this, we are in a crisis already. Let's not add another crisis. We have proposed a way that we can support the students of Hillsborough Primary School. We have proposed a way that we would come out of this, that persons would not be severely affected with the additional support that was going to be given. But there is no funds, there's no funds to be able to facilitate the construction of a new building for 4 months to accommodate these students. And I also think maybe in a Christian-like way, if we look at it, and Father Marshall did indicate that he would have spoken to that at the Carriacou level as well. The same students who are at that school, Hillsborough Government School, are going to grow up to be the same students at the secondary level. You just don't know what would happen tomorrow. So to propose that the students at Bishop's College must stay home for the 5 days, while the students at Hillsborough Primary go for the 5 days, as opposed to sharing 2 to 3 and rotating it for the next couple months with support, I am a little bit concerned, Blossom. We have to look at the bigger picture. I do understand the concern of the parents of Hillsborough government, but sometimes we have to work together in a crisis. We have to support. Look, we have persons from St. Vincent who may likely be coming here for rescue. Now, one might think in the middle of a crisis, why should we do that? Exposing ourselves to COVID-19? When your brother is in trouble, when your brother is in pain, when your brother is in a crisis, it's just the human thing. It is just the right thing to see how possible we can offer some support. Financially, we are not in a position to expand that project. I just told you, $10.7 million, plus what we did not cater for on the other building. To go to do temporary structures now is financially difficult. The bank has said definitely it is not possible within the budget that we have. So I'm just asking for patience, for understanding. It's a short period, and we are going to support the students who are affected in the particular situations.
Somebody's asking if consideration was given for the students to be housed at the community center.
I'm telling you, Blossom, all options were looked at. As a matter of fact, even with the students doing the days in and days out at Hillsborough, there are some other buildings that are going to be used for other purposes. And it could well include the community center. I'm not sure of the fine details, but what I can tell you is that those are being worked out logistically, and the Minister for Karakou has decided to give whatever support that can be given. Of course, we know this is a major financial situation, and of course, she may not be able to do too much, but whatever support. So, for example, the community brigade has been committed. Other things have been committed to do whatever is possible to work this out. But wherever they go, whatever happens, there more than likely would be some kind of need for collaboration between the two schools. And I really want to encourage them to look at the bigger picture. Today might be Bishop's College, tomorrow could be Hillsborough Secondary, or Dover Government, or Hillsborough Government. Let us think a little broader in those circumstances and those situations.
There are one on the Facebook and two that I've been seeing so far on WhatsApp basically asking the same thing. So I'll sum it up. Have government ministers, cabinet ministers considered taking a pay cut in order to facilitate being able to pay the 4% to public officers and teachers? And somebody else is also asking, has government given consideration to cutting the number of ministers and advisors currently employed?
And let me say this, I normally like to look at things from a critical perspective, and I don't go on the emotion. So the emotion may cause me to think, well, if you just cut certain people's salary or remove certain people, it may solve a problem. So let's just think logically now of how many ministers of government we have. What is their salary? Their salaries are lower than many of the public officers that we are speaking about, right? And in addition to that, let us take the conversation a little further to say, if we cut their salary and cut off one or two of them, will that be able to give us monies to pay 4% for all teachers and all public officers for 1 month, January, February, March, maybe April? Logically speaking, will that be practically possible to achieve, right? And I just want to say this, let us look at the bigger picture. Sometimes when we narrow our view of things, it causes us not to get the global picture that is so important to understand the context of a situation, right? So if you're talking about over $13 million that you're looking to raise and raise it consistently, the question is, will that answer the problem? Will that solve the problem?
All right, let's go back to the landline. Good morning, caller.
Good morning. I guess the minister would think critically now. Now, should in the event, or do you look into or assume or come to the conclusion or don't come to the conclusion that suppose by chance the whole set of ministers or the government decides to resign, no longer any prime minister, no longer any... No, I'm asking myself, maybe that could be in their interest, and then you plunge the country into a deeper problem. So who would be responsible for then paying the intended increase? Let's assume all the ministers resign because they might see that they're in a dilemma, they're in crisis. as you said, Vince, in crisis, crying out that they might not be able to pay money and this and that. Suppose by chance they say what you eat is what you save. So maybe that's a good reason why the teachers or the people want the money. So I wanted to make a comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister.
All right. I was hearing the caller a little broken, but I am hoping that I understood what he was saying. But let me bring us back. You see, again, I'm saying when we're in a problem, and that applies to a personal life or relationships, it applies to everything. When there's a problem, we got to think it through in a way that we come up with solutions that is in the best interest, is for the better. So we can't just be jumping to conclusions and suggestions and ideas that is going to take us in a worse place. And I'm saying whatever those conclusions are, so we can decide, okay, we need to pay the 4% right now, let us just pay it. And guess what? Tomorrow morning, you have to cut the public service staff. Is that in the best interest? Tomorrow morning, you have to send home workers because you're not able to meet the full salary commitment, plus all of these poor pensioners who need the 4%, and we agree on that, right? Let us just cut it, let us just pay it today. And guess what? Tomorrow, you have to introduce a new tax because you need to raise more revenue to be able to do it. And that is why it is so important that we think critically when there's a problem, there's a crisis, there's a situation. And that is what the Ministry of Finance has done. To look at how are we going. So I was saying to somebody quite recently, the government could have taken a decision when it started paying the stimulus packages and say we're going to pay that forever until COVID-19 is finished. That would be a brilliant idea. But did somebody sit down to see if one more month is going to cause us to have to send a few people home to be able to get more monies to continue the stimulus package? And which decision is best? What's the wisest of the two to make? And it's the same thing. Now, if we're talking getting rid of one government and bringing in another and all of that, it's again, I think, one of those emotional conversations that we don't get back to the reality of the situation. Because we had another government in 2008 to 2013. Teachers needed an increase. It's not that they didn't need an increase between 2008 and 2013. They did. But guess what the government did? Negotiated it with a plan to pay after the election. Who does that? Who does that? The intention could have never been noble and genuine if you negotiate it and you have a plan and intention. I was reading something only yesterday about the road to hell and intentions, right? You don't do that. You make a commitment, you negotiate, and you pay it, which is what our government did. So if we're talking about government in and government out and get rid of that one, it is the same government then. And it was never my intention to speak about this, but because the caller raised it, let me overemphasize it. It was the same government then that the same teachers, as one person described, were getting their salary on the 40th of the month. Students, I'm just using an exaggeration here, meaning that when the month ended, many persons could not get their salary and had to wait for the next month. It was during the same period that the government was selling buildings owned by government until it ended up selling a building that was not owned by government. To be able to pay these salaries, do we want to go back there? We want to go back to a situation where to be able to pay you your salary at the end of the month, we have to sell something? Blossom, put yourself in that situation. To be able to pay your bills month end, every month you have to sell some of your shoes, sell some of your clothes, sell some of the furniture in your house. How sustainable is that? You might have enough that you can manage for a while, but how sustainable is that? And where does that leave you? And that's just the reality of the context. So we can get emotional and say, get rid of NNP government, get rid of Kit Mitchell, get rid of this. Let's just look back at the crisis that we've had in this country during the period of the New National Party government. And let us go back to the performance of the NNP administration in every crisis, including that one, this one now. I'm first to admit, we have never been perfect, and no other has been. But the performance of this government far outweighs the performance of any other government during the period that we're speaking about. And maybe we can just take it short and we can just go back a couple terms prior. I'm making the point, Blossom. This is not a time for us to get all emotional, who we like, who we don't like, who we hate, who we this, who we that. It is not a time for that. It's a time for coming together. So, for example, a good suggestion, why not start an afternoon class to help some students in a community? Yes, you support the teachers, they want their 4%, that's okay, that's your choice to support that they want it now. I support them that they should get it, but I'm not supporting that they should get it right now because I understand the situation. So I would match with them, no problem, but not for the government to put us in a position that's going to make us worse off. And that's the point I'm making. I would say go in your community, organize a little after school class, help some students that are below the average. Maybe get a program, started something to help some children. And that would be my advice. Matching for the payment of the 4% now is going to put all of us in a worse situation. Who does that?
Somebody on Facebook is asking, can you clarify what is the true story with the MCT? You would have made certain statements in your national address. However, there's information out there that counteracted your statements that our country did well in terms of mathematics and English language.
Right. And I saw that comment, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to clarify that. There was no error in the statement that I made. MCT is a locally administered assessment. As a matter of fact, only this week, I was saying to the officers in the Ministry of Education, let us ensure that we have a serious engagement with our teachers who are involved in MCT to remind them what MCT is. Why? MCT means, the M means minimum. So you hear people celebrating MCT results. MCT means minimum, the minimum level that you should be. So this is not an assessment for celebration. I mean, of course, maybe to an extent, but this is your minimum performance. And I heard Didicus Jules, director of the OECS, made a similar statement with regards to another country. Let us not start celebrating MCT. It is an assessment to let us know what do you do next? How do you correct the problems and the deficiencies? So the other reference that was made by that person is an external examination. And if they're going back to my speech, I am speaking about another assessment, which is an assessment to do with reading. MCT does not assess reading. So again, let us not get emotional about who is saying. Let us assess what is the fact. So MCT assesses math and language. The assessment that I spoke about that the OECS did had nothing to do with math or language. It was specific to do with reading ability. And yes, I did not make an error. I was correct when I said that students were reading more than a grade below their level, which brings me back to the point I made when I started. Let us be careful about getting complacent and celebrating achievements without knowing at what level the assessment was. So I can celebrate that this child would have gotten 60% in that reading assessment. But guess what? The child is in grade 2. And that assessment was for grade 1. So it means that the teacher now has to take that information to inform the actions that they are going to take, because it can therefore not be business as usual for that child. And we have to ensure that we don't continue to end up with students getting into secondary school unable to read because we focus in on whether it was MCT or OECS or whether the minister made a mistake. No, I didn't. MCT does not assess reading.
And the final question that we'll have time for, somebody on the WhatsApp is asking, ask the minister why every year students have to be home because of school repairs. When children were home for months during COVID time, why weren't the school repairs done during that period when school wasn't occupied?
Mm-hmm. Very good question. And I'll say to the caller, a very genuine question as well. And we do empathize, we apologize, everything that we can do. The reality of, and I'll be specific to this school year, we had about 8 or 9 schools that could not reopen on Monday because of repairs. And caller, in those cases and other cases in the past, very often, maybe sometimes delays on the part of contractors and all others will minus that, but very often too is because of the scope of the project. But the schools in question now, I would say a week delay is worth it. Guess what? The work cannot be done within a 3-week period in many cases, which was the length of the last vacation. And guess what? The monies are available now, but we must use it by June. So you know what I would have said? Let's continue getting some wet in the classroom or the leaks and so on, and let's wait for the 8 weeks in August. But this is some emergency funds that we were able to tap into, and it closes off in June. So these contractors must finish before June to be able to get the project completed. So in some cases, of course, they will do extra work in the evening. They will work on the weekend. And I want to use this opportunity. Thank you, caller. I'm going to use the opportunity to encourage our contractors to be part of the stakeholder community for education and understand if you have to give a little extra, as I said, make a little sacrifice. Let's do it for the children. But caller, in this case, it's really justified. And I beg for your patience, beg for your understanding, because after June, we don't want these schools to be leaking. We don't want, to have the bat infestation. We don't want the broken screens to be falling on children. It is the reason why we weighed the risk and said, you know what, an extra week home, it might be better than not having this important opportunity for a repair. And mind you, principals are calling, when are you coming to our school? Why this school and not this school? So you understand, and I beg for your patience and your understanding. And I know that you're quite capable of understanding this.
Thank you very much, Minister Pierre, for being our guest this morning. Appreciate it. That's all the time we have for today. But of course, the government always has a spot here on To The Point every Wednesday. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, Blossom, and thanks to your listeners for what I consider brilliant and excellent questions that provided an opportunity for clarification.
Thank you so much, Minister. Enjoy. Minister of Education, Honorable Emmalin Pierre, we thank her for being our guest, and thank you, our guest. And thank you, our viewers and listeners, for tuning in to The Point. That's the end of my time today. Mid-Morning Buzz is up next. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.